Thank you guys for getting on this call with me. I have been following you for, a few years since you were traveling and doing all the things like that. So I kind of wanted to have you on because I just saw that you were in Spain. Tell me what you guys have been doing the past couple of years before baby with all the travel stuff, how getting pregnant and COVID changed everything, or if it didn't change everything. And now your plans for what you're doing with baby and continuing the travel, and you bought a house and all the things. Just give me the roundup of the past couple of years.
The rundown.
Yeah.
You want to start? You want me to start?
I'll start. So we got married back in 2017. We both have always loved to travel, but had never really thought about traveling full time, or really thought that was a possibility or an option. To be honest, until we saw you do it, and you were a bit of our inspiration. Like, okay, Shayla's doing this. This looks awesome. Like, let's try and do it our own way, And so at that point, we started looking into how we might be able to. Well, this was in 2017. So now I fast forwarded to like 2018, and we were thinking about how we could sort of live remotely and still work, or do we have to save up money? At that point, we were living in Chicago and we were both in grad school. So we decided to just make the maybe irresponsible decision right when we graduated grad school to not go get jobs, but to just move into a minivan that we converted into a camper van and hit the road. I think we chose van life because it was the most cost effective for us. We stayed at free campsites. I think we paid for a campsite once in like 15 months on the road, and we cooked all our own meals, and so you pay for gas, food, and some entertainment.
Yeah, we basically traveled on about $1,200 a month for the both of us. So that was basically our way to stretch our travels like as long as possible. That's why we chose the van life to start with. We did that for a year throughout all of the US and Canada. And then we went home for the holidays, and then we're trying to figure out like what's next. And
this is the end of 2019.
Right.
And so then we decided to go to New Zealand at the start of 2020, right as COVID was starting to kind of brew, and we were hearing about it, right? But it wasn't causing travel restrictions yet. And we lived in a van, so it's not like you get a ton of news.
Facts.
So, to be honest, I knew it was a real thing when we went to the library and all the pandemic books were out in the front. And so that kind of led us to like, oh, this is a big thing, isn't it? That's happening.
Yeah. So we went to New Zealand. We did the van life there for 3 months until like COVID really started to shut things down. And like he kind of mentioned, in New Zealand, it was kind of like one of the last countries to get hit too. So we were there and life was just pretty much normal. But like talking to our families back home, everybody's like, things are shutting down. You guys aren't going to get home if you don't come home. So, and we had a flight actually to go to Australia after our 3 months in New Zealand, but then Australia shut their borders down. So we basically were, forced home. And at that point, it was the safest thing to do. So we ended up going home at the end of March of 2020. Came back to Zach's parents' house and stayed with the in-laws for a few months. But basically at that point we were thinking, okay, we're going to be home for a few months and then we're off again. Like this will be done in 3 months. Then we'll buy a ticket to New Zealand or Southeast Asia, wherever, and continue our travels. And then, after 2 months, like it was just getting worse.
No end in sight.
There was no end in sight. And actually, back up a little bit, in New Zealand, we've always knew that we wanted a family, but it was the first real conversation we had about kind of like our timeline on when we wanted to start having kids, because we enjoyed traveling so much, but obviously I was 30 years old at the time. And so kind of wanted to get started somewhat soon. And so we kind of decided, okay, we'll travel this year. And then once I'm 31, like hopefully I'll get pregnant when I turn 31 and we'll have our first baby when I'm 31 or 32. But after the world was still shut down, or the whole time COVID was still going on, you should tell the story about how we kind of decided, because you were the one that
you should
brought
tell
it up.
the story about how we got pregnant. Yeah, that's
I was there.
So you're the
that's good.
he was the one that really pushed for it.
I did push for it.
I was not ready yet, but you were, so you should.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about.
The story about the podcast you were listening to, and
that.
Come on, babe, the story.
Okay, so I was listening to this one podcast. I actually don't even remember whose podcast it was. That's how good it was. But I do remember one part of the story was that this guy was speaking to a group of Silicon Valley employees, Silicon Valley like tech employees, developers, etc. And it was about purpose and finding your purpose in your work and in life in general. And this guy who was speaking recognized that there was a lot of 25, 28, 30, 33, 35-year-old people in the crowd, a lot of them male, and they weren't married, and they didn't have families, and they didn't have children. And so he had asked a question, like, how many of you have struggled to find purpose in your work and in your life? And everyone raised their hand. Then he asked, how many of you have children or a family? And everyone put their hands down. And so then he asked the question, like, have you ever thought maybe you have a family-sized hole in your life? And that question kind of hit me. And I was like, because I've always kind of felt like, what's my purpose in life, and what am I here for? And especially as you log into work for 8 hours for this company, you're like, what am I doing with my time here? And so that question, or that answer, or that kind of question stuck with me. And that was right around the time that we were kind of deciding what to do. We'd been quarantining for a month after New Zealand, and then it had been another month, and looked like we were not going to be traveling again anytime soon. So that's when I started pushing for, let's just pull the goalie and see what happens. And so that's what we ended up doing. We weren't super confident that we would get pregnant right away, because I mean, we had known people that didn't succeed right away, and so we were just okay, let's see what happens. And then 1 month later we were pregnant.
Oh my God.
So yeah, and everybody's obviously journey is very different. We were super fortunate that it happened so quickly for us. But yeah, basically Zach, we talked about it. He's like, let's just pull the goalie, see what happens. We'll just keep it very stress-free. If it happens, it's meant to be. If it doesn't, it's okay. We can continue doing what we're doing. And so yeah, I agreed, kind of thinking in my mind, like, it'll take it'll take 6 months probably. That's the average. 6 months is the average for a female to get pregnant. And so that was what I had in my mind. And then that first month went by, and I ended up late and asked Zach to pick up a pregnancy test. He came home, I took it, and yeah, sure enough, it was positive. So
oh my gosh.
And then I right away break down, because I'm like, we don't have a house. We didn't have health insurance at the time. Neither of us had full-time jobs, so we don't have benefit. Like all this stuff, I was like, what did we do? I started panicking immediately. Zach is very good at talking me off the ledge. She so brilliantly did.
Daily.
And like, Julie, it makes a long time to make a baby. Like, we have 9 months to figure this out. So we figured everything out. We both got jobs. We got an apartment in Plymouth, Minnesota. What was the other thing?
Bought health insurance.
Bought health insurance, got it, yeah, through work. So we were golden by the time Indy came. She came in February of 2021. And you know, when she came, we knew that our goal was to keep traveling like as much as we could. Things were still pretty shut down in February,
Right.
so it wasn't really an option out of the gate, nor did we really want to when she was like that young. Just, you know, give her a little bit of time for an immune system to build and things like that before we're hauling her in planes and dirty places. So when did we book our first trip? Do you remember?
Well, the next thing was our house.
Oh yeah. Don't let me skip.
Yeah.
So we lived in an apartment, like Julie said, in Plymouth, but we knew we wanted a house to raise a family in. And we thought about buying a house in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, kind of where we're from and where we've lived for a long time. But we decided to kind of roll the dice and try and buy one in a house somewhere that we want to visit, and we want to maybe not have forever as a home base, but it's in somewhere that we always want to go, and maybe we could rent out as some sort of passive income source when we're not there. And so we started looking around out west. We love out everywhere out west in the Rockies and even the Pacific coast and everything. We had taken our honeymoon in Zion National Park and loved it there. So we kind of drew a radius of an hour around Zion, and that was one of the places we searched among others all up and down the Rockies. But that's where we ended up finding an awesome house. It was a duplex that was for sale, that was in our price range. It had a really cool mountain view, and it had been on the market for like a month or two. So we put an offer out a little below the asking price. And this was without seeing it. We had done a virtual tour, but we were still kind of questionable about traveling with Julie was like 8 months pregnant at the time. So we were like, do we fly down to? So anyways, we just did a virtual tour on FaceTime and asked a ton of questions, and we knew we were going to get an inspection and stuff. So we would just trust that. But we ended up putting an offer in and coming to an agreement, and that's the house we got. So we bought it without seeing it. Yeah, without seeing it. But it was I think it was a great decision in the end.
That's the second house we bought without seeing it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we also bought our Chicago condo that we sold when we moved into the van without seeing that. But that worked out too. So maybe that's the way to go, is to not look at the house before buying it.
That's the advice for this podcast episode specifically. Don't look at houses. Just roll the dice.
Put your offer in.
It'll be fine. I mean, I feel like it also has a lot to do with your attitude about it. Like, because you guys did renovations and stuff. So you could have walked in there and been like, oh my gosh. But instead you were like, cool, this is amazing. We can do this and we can do this.
Right.
So I think your attitude has a lot to do with the success or the failure. Yeah. Granted, there can be like serious plumbing issues and things like that. That's a real issue.
That's true.
Your attitude has a lot to do with making.
For sure.
Yeah, it did need some work. I mean, we did do maybe 2 months of renovations on it, and we had some contractor come and help us out for a lot of it. So it wasn't like it was turnkey. This is the house we love right away. You know, so we were expecting that.
Yeah. We knew it was going to need work before we got there.
But anyways, then when Indy was 6 weeks, so this is like start of end of March. Then we moved down there from Minnesota to Utah. So we did the whole like road trip 2 hours at a time with Indy out there. So that ended up taking 3 days.
Yeah.
But it was fine, I think. We would just drive when she napped, and then she woke up and we'd hang out with her for a while. She still slept all day.
Yeah, it's pretty easy when she was only 6 weeks because they sleep so much.
Right.
So, you know, it actually went relatively smooth compared to recent trips we've done with her in the car. So, but you
moved out when she was 6 weeks old. Did anyone move out there with you? Like to help?
Yep.
My
Julie's
parents.
parents did.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
amazing. All right, great.
Yep. So they kind of caravaned with us,
Oh,
and it was a fun little trip.
Yeah, and we didn't really have any furniture. So our like apartment furniture that we were using was actually like Zach's parents' patio furniture. Like
Yeah.
it was just very makeshift furniture that we put together because we only lived there for 4
Yeah, 3 or
months
4
or
months.
something. Basically because we wanted to have our baby in Minnesota before we moved, was why we got that place.
great.
So we didn't really care what the furniture was. We're like, let's just get through these 4 months. And then once we get there, we'll, buy stuff. So we didn't have a whole lot. And we also have our Airstream, another story. We own a 30-foot Airstream that we drove out there. And that was basically our U-Haul. We packed everything we owned in that Airstream and paid someone to drive it out there for us.
Yeah.
Which is now parked in our backyard in Utah and is also an Airbnb.
Amazing.
So, yeah, where are we?
Okay. The
Now we have a
story
house.
is derailed.
Yeah.
What
And we're
happened? This
going
is
way
perfect.
out
This
of
is
order.
exactly, no, this is great. I'm loving this.
Okay. So at this point, we are out in Utah. We moved in and we started raising Indy there. She lived from 6 weeks until, a month ago. So until
4
4
months.
months. So we spent 2.5 months out there, and we're doing a lot of renovations, and obviously raising a newborn takes up most of 2 people's time. So just doing that, trying to keep her fed and warm and healthy and everything.
Mhm.
But that was a great 2.5 months, I think. That was kind of fun, kind of nesting sort of in this house. And we were also setting it up to be a rental for if we did want to move out. And so at that point, this is like 2 months ago, I got the opportunity to take a work trip to Spain. It was for a week that they would fly me out there and put me up in a hotel out in Spain. And I asked if I could bring my family, if they could get across the border, basically, if with
Spain
COVID
wasn't
restrictions.
open. Spain wasn't open yet.
But they said yes, so that wasn't a big deal. And so instead of a week at a hotel, we booked a month at an Airbnb. And so we extended our time to stay there for a month. And just since I was going to be working there, and working for only a week isn't a ton of time to explore a place if you're busy for 9 to 10 hours
Right.
during the
If you're
week.
actually working. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So we booked a month, and also on Airbnb you get like the monthly discount at some places that they give you,
Oh.
which can be like 30 to 40%.
It's such a good
It's
deal.
like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
actually like makes it really affordable depending on where you go.
Yeah.
So we booked that and ended up going to Spain for the last month or so, for like basically all of July,
Mhm.
which was awesome. Indy got to take her first plane ride, which was a little brutal. And then her second and third and fourth and fifth plane rides were a lot better.
Oh
So-
my
Where's
gosh.
Yeah, well, and she was crying the whole time for a lot of
Didn't
it.
it? Well, our
Anyways.
first plane ride got canceled. So
Yeah.
we
I
were
remember watching
scheduled
it.
for an overnight flight from Minneapolis to Paris. It ended up getting canceled, and so we had to be rebooked. So this is like 11 p.m. with Indy in an airport, trying to get rebooked. Finally, we're like, peace, we're going to the hotel. We'll figure this out tonight or tomorrow morning. Got it figured out, but then we had to do 2 stops to get to Barcelona. And it was like during the day.
Oh
So it was a much more difficult trip to get
Yeah.
there.
You
But
don't
we
really
made it.
realize that, I don't know, like when you fly with a baby, the timing is always so critical. You're like, I plan this down to the minute. She's falling asleep right as we're taking off after she eats, and then it all goes to hell. And
Right.
can we swear on this podcast?
Yeah.
It all goes to shit, and then you have to audible and figure it out as you go.
Oh my
basically.
gosh. Okay, well, that's quite the freaking adventure. I love it so much. okay, let's kind of like backtrack a little. So you went into the van life and you completely built this thing. I remember watching your guys' Instagram stories, just being like, what? How does he know how to do that? Or like, what are you guys doing? And it was just crazy to watch you build it all. And then you kind of said like, because I was reading through your blog a little bit and you were like, there's a million ways to do this like van life or like full-time travel thing. And you guys went into the travel blogging space and kind of were doing Pinterest and blogs and guides for people as they were traveling around the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So around the van, we basically had to bootstrap it and figure it out ourselves because of cost reasons.
Yeah.
We didn't have a lot of money, and our budget, like Julie said earlier, was like $1,200 a month, and our budget for the van was $5,000. And so we found,
the cost of
including the van, and so we found the van for $4,000, and it was a Volkswagen Eurovan, 2001, silver. I'm still sad we sold it.
Did you sell it? I was gonna ask that.
Yeah. I want another one, so I'm actually looking, but I have to convince her. Great. It's a great van. I loved it. But we only had $1,000 to renovate it.
Oh,
so we
wow.
couldn't do anything like crazy awesome. And we knew we wanted solar and running water. And so we watched a ton of YouTube videos.
Sure.
And got a ton of inspiration from a lot of different people who have done couples van life, basically, and ended up scraping this thing together. We bought solar panels for the roof and batteries and a solar system, and that took up like half of our cost. So then we kind of had to figure out how to do the rest with like the leftover wood at Menards that they kind of sell you for half off, and just whatever we could find. If people were throwing it away, we would take it. And so we had like an old
kitchen sink.
No, it was a bathroom sink. It was an old bathroom vanity. It was our sink. And so we just bought a water pump and had 2 5-gallon tanks and ran it all in. And we figured it all out kind of through YouTube and asking people. My dad's pretty handy, so he helped us out a little bit just with advice on how to do electrical and stuff like that. But that was a fun experience. And then the blogging.
Yeah, we actually started the blog before we left for van life.
Just started with an Instagram.
Then we started our blog in 2018, before like end of 2018, before we actually left for the van. But it wasn't like, at that point it was making no money at all. So
it was making no money for like a year and a half.
Yeah, it wasn't funding any of our travels whatsoever. Our Instagram would occasionally get us maybe a free night in a hotel, for photography or whatever, a blog post exchange, something like that. So that was really like the only perks we were getting at that time. And since then we've just been, building our blog. It's now making pennies.
No,
covers my internet at my house.
Quarters.
We're making quarters.
Hey, quarters are good.
Better than pennies.
But it's fun. I mean, we enjoy traveling, and we enjoy sharing our experience and sharing our places we've been, tips we have. So it's fun.
Yeah, I feel like so many people helped us by just posting their content on YouTube and blogs. And I know people do it for money, but it's also really helpful when people do it. So we wanted to do it also.
Yeah.
And if you look at how much we make hourly, it's probably nothing.
And I think that's the point when you start things like that, is you actually have to enjoy doing it. Yeah. Like that's why I started YouTube versus a blog, because I hate writing. And so it was easier for me to like get on a video and talk about things. And so then I enjoyed it. And the same thing, like I just made a video talking about getting to 100,000 subscribers. And I was looking at my analytics for the first 3 years. Thanks. After 3 years of doing it, I had 7,000 subscribers. 3 years.
Yeah.
And in the next 3 years, I think I got the other 90,000 or whatever, but like
Right.
that's a really long time to be making videos so that I can rewatch them, basically.
Right.
Totally.
No one's
You
there.
have to, you have to enjoy it. Otherwise, like, why would you do it?
Now you can make them for your child to rewatch them.
Totally. Yeah.
I have a new reason.
Yeah.
So let's go into tips for flying, since you do the tips and all. Did you guys write a blog about this yet?
We are going to. We should probably write one.
Yeah, it's in the works. Tips for flying specifically. So first one I would say is, actually, let me pull up my notes so I don't butcher this, because I wrote a list so I don't miss any of my tips that I had. Let me pull it up here.
Well, and this will probably be up after you, I don't know when you plan on writing your blog, but by the time this is up, because I'm going to launch in like October, probably, we can probably direct it.
It'll perfect. So the best, we already talked about how travel doesn't always go as planned, but in an ideal world, scheduling your flight during like your baby's nap time or an overnight flight, if it's like a long haul flight, is a big help. Just because, if they fall asleep, obviously they're easy to take care of instead of a crying, whiny baby or something. But obviously flights get delayed all the time, canceled. Even if they're on the runway and don't take off, like that happened to us on this trip too, where I'm like, when are they going to take off? I need to feed her so she can fall asleep. So it doesn't always work out, but that is a big tip if you can do that. And then going off that, for the pressure in their ears, I fed her on takeoff and landing, which is supposed to just help, like clear their ears, help them pop them. It did. Yeah, it did work.
So she, like, when we were driving out to Utah, we drove through the Rockies and she had a horrible time, we think, because of her ears. When we were driving up the incline, she just started screaming. So we had to pull over and calm her down. And so we were worried about that on the flight with her ears popping. And so that made Julie feed her as we were taking off and landing. And we didn't have really any issues with her when she was eating. She didn't really have any ear popping problems, wasn't screaming because she was in pain. She would cry because she was annoyed or whatever sometimes, but
annoyed, tired. But so that, or, obviously you can bottle. I breastfeed, so it was really easy for me, just to pop her on. But a bottle, we can talk about this later, but you can bring formula on your flights. So a bottle's an option, or pre-pumped milk, or even like a pacifier is supposed to work. So, obviously, like takeoff and landing, it can take a while. And Indy maybe feeds for 10 minutes, and then she's usually done. So once she was done, I would just give her pacifier, and that seemed to help too. So
do you have any tips for like feeding on the plane, or do you just whip it out no problem?
So this is kind of funny. So I was really like nervous about that. I don't know.
About
breastfeeding in public in general. I was always very like, I'm a first time mom, whatever. So I was nervous about that. I have a cover, that I usually put on and tuck her under. But she just like doesn't feed very well with that thing. Like she just gets distracted by it, or she's hot. I don't know. But so she never gets a good feeding with that thing. So on the plane, I was just like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Because I was just worried that she was gonna start screaming. So I was like, whatever, I don't care. I was on the window seat, so that was kind of like more coverage. And then Zach kind of like held up a little muslin blanket.
Wait, didn't?
On the way there, you did.
Okay.
To kind of cover me.
Maybe one.
So funny.
On the way there, you did. But then it was interesting. In Europe, I like got over my fear because we were on the go so much, and I was just like, whatever. She needs to be fed, and I don't know. I got the impression that in Europe, people just didn't care as much. Like moms were walking around just feeding their child all the time. I saw a lot of moms doing that. So I was like, okay, I can do this too.
Yeah.
If she's hungry, I'm going to feed her. I don't care where it is or what needs to be done. So then on the way home, I was just like kind of over it at that point and just
You're like,
whipped it
I'm
out.
European now. I'm doing what the Europeans do. No, I was just on a flight and it was the same thing. Like we were just going to Arizona. So it was a quick up and down, but it was still anxiety.
Mhm.
You're just like, is my kid gonna cry the whole time? And
Yeah.
I set
Yeah.
up this, like, I tucked the blanket into the tray. So I like put the tray, tucked it in there and then like put it over my head.
There you
Oh,
go.
that's great.
Hey, that's smart.
Wow, that's a great tip.
But it's the same thing. It's like, okay, do you want to look the other way while I'm feeding, or do you want her to scream or whatever?
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
I don't care. Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
Exactly. I mean,
Right.
Comfort.
yeah,
It's-
the alternative is a crying baby. So,
exactly. Yeah.
but yeah, if you are uncomfortable, I think that's a great tip, or bringing some kind of blanket or cover.
Yeah.
If you have
Or the
one.
shirt. I had a shirt too that like opened like here.
Yes.
Just, like,
Oh yeah,
oh,
the
nice.
right up and-
breastfeeding.
yeah.
Just keep it out a little bit.
Yeah.
We have a long list of tips. We're only on number 3.
Yeah.
Okay, rapid fire. Number 3, use a baby carrier, hands-free whenever possible. So we have an Ergo baby. It's like a nice little
Yep.
carrier that she sits in, faces out, that it's comfortable for her. And then we
That's
can
for-
carry luggage.
Yeah.
And that's for what?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's for boarding and unboard and deplaning. What do you call it? Onboarding?
Onboarding?
Getting off.
Getting off the plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you're like trying to grab your luggage and stuff
Right.
off the overheads, like you don't want to have like your baby in one arm. So a carrier was super helpful just to
Number
have
4.
hands free.
Overnight diapers.
Yeah.
Long plane rides, a lot of pee, and you don't want to change her all the time. You don't want to change her every time she pees, like 5 times on a flight. So overnight diapers with the extra absorbency, we found that was really helpful.
Did you
Mhm.
change her in the seat or did you go to the bathroom?
Both.
I did both.
If we had an open seat next to us, then we would change her there. If we had, like, there was one flight where we had 3 to ourselves, so like the middle one was open, then we just changed her there.
Yeah.
But when we didn't have an extra seat, then we'd bring her to the bathroom.
I learned this though, there is a changing table in the bathroom on the
In all of
airplane. I
them?
had no idea.
I didn't know that.
Not well, I guess it probably depends which plane. Not everyone will have one, but there's specific, they'll show like
It's like a little
changing
icon on
table.
the thing.
Huh.
Yeah, so there are, but I can see like they're not big. So
Yeah.
Indy fit pretty well, but I can imagine, when she gets bigger, it would be a lot more challenging. But that's I had no idea. So
I didn't know either.
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Number 5, dress your baby and yourself very comfortably. I'm like, when she was on me, I was sweating the entire time. So got very hot. I just had her in her pajamas. Like I didn't put her in her cutest outfit to go to the
Right.
airport. I just
Right.
like made her comfortable so that hopefully she would be comfy and sleep.
I'm gonna pause real quick.
No.
Sorry. I actually
Go
heard
ahead.
to do sort of like a nighttime routine if you can. So like if you do the lotion
Yes.
and change them into
Yes.
pajamas and like as much of a routine that you do at home to try and do that when you're
For sure.
Right. Actually, yes. So on our way there, I didn't do that. On the way back, I did. And it's crazy how much like her routine, just like she knows it. So
Really?
I put her like in her sleep sack, and this was for a nap on the plane, which obviously it wasn't dark, wasn't a bedroom or crib or anything, but I just put her in her sleep sack. Like I sing to her like I always do, gave her
Right.
her nook, and she fell right asleep. So I think if you do have a bedtime routine, try to stick to it as much as you can. Because they definitely recognize it, and it's a good cue for
Mhm.
what they're supposed to do. Fall asleep.
Yeah.
Another tip, pack a change for yourself and your baby in your carry-on.
Blowout.
Yeah. If you don't get
all
peed
the
on,
time.
puked on, or pooped on, you're lucky. So
Yeah.
have a change for yourself too, so you don't have to walk
This
around the airport.
might be just our daughter. I think it's probably all of them. Just blows out once a day, probably. Maybe, I don't know. Something that she's eating doesn't
Well, that
sit
would
right.
No, yes.
But so
And
she ruins outfits all the time.
Yeah.
And so we always have to have an extra outfit along.
Yes.
And it's brutal when we don't. So
Yeah.
we usually pack two
mhm.
whenever we can, especially for a flight. Just having them ready, it would be the worst if it was in our checked bag or something like that. So just
Right.
make sure you have access to an extra change.
Yeah.
Right. So
I have two more.
Great.
Take minimal carry-on luggage. So we used to be like hardcore. We are not paying for a dang bag. We are taking backpacks, like Spirit Airlines all the way here. Get a backpack. We don't care. But now that we have her, it's worth the $30 to check a bag for us, just to minimize what we're trying to lug through the airport and like carry a baby. So especially we didn't actually check a car seat or stroller this time around, but if you were, I can imagine like how much, even like more stuff that's you're trying to look through the airport.
But a separate thing is that sometimes, depending on the airline, your baby might get a check bag. So we did fly where Indy got a check bag.
That's for international
Oh,
flights.
international.
That's
For
amazing.
international flights, your baby gets a 20-pound bag.
Checked.
Even if you're
Checked
not
for
paying
free.
for a ticket.
Well, for international
Internationally-
flights, you have to pay taxes,
Oh, okay.
That's it.
which
For a
is like 10% or something. So
Interesting.
since you're paying that, they give you a 20-pound bag with it, which is nice.
Great. The stroller
Mhm.
I found was a little bit helpful for throwing stuff in. So like if
Yes.
you had your carry-on, it was like you didn't have to carry it. It was like throw in the stroller. Aaliyah was in her car seat in the stroller, and then I just checked it at the gate. It gets a little dinged up, so you're kind of like, that's her safety seat. So I don't really feel super sweet about that.
Totally.
Right. Which is why I was hesitant, I guess. If like we didn't need a car seat, I was like, I don't want to check it if I don't need to. So we didn't. But we did actually buy a travel stroller. So it's one that folds up really small, so it fits in the overhead compartments of airplanes. So we can actually, usually we use that to wheel through the airport, then we switch her to the carrier, fold up the stroller, and then we can take it on, which is nice. Then you don't have to worry about gate checking it or it being broken, I guess.
Yeah. Well, when you did the car, so you didn't do a car seat at all?
So we rented one when we got there.
Oh, so
which I know people have mixed feelings about that too. We've used it super minimally, so
we rented. So in the Airbnb, we didn't have a crib or anything, so we rented a pack and play and a car seat from this local company in Spain that rented them, and so that was perfect for. They had it waiting at the Airbnb for us when we got there, and then they picked it up from there when we left. So it was like really stress-free, and that was nice.
I feel like that would be great for a high chair as well, because sometimes like
they did have that too.
And these like baby equipment rental places are popping up everywhere, I feel like. So if you're going somewhere, definitely Google and see if you can rent some things, and that way you can lighten your load, It's usually pretty reasonable. And actually in Berlin, we found this like secondhand store that also rented gear. So we were able to rent a crib there for super cheap. It was like $6 for a week.
Oh
or €6, I guess, for a week.
Perfect.
So that was super nice.
That is
then the last tip is also just for international flights. They give you a bassinet if you're in the bulkhead seat with a baby, and so you can request the bulkhead seat, and if you request a bassinet, which are typically first come first serve, then they will, if there's one left, they'll bring one out for you, plug it in, and then so right in front of your seat is a bassinet where you can lay your baby in and put him to sleep. And that was perfect on our international flight over. we didn't get it on the way back. And so we were hurting on the way back. We just Julie just held her for like a 4-hour nap, and then I held her for the rest of the
Oh my
of
God.
the night
That
of the
was
night.
so nice.
Right.
But that was our last tip: is get up
Ask
to the
for the
gate
bassinet.
and ask for the bassinet
And a
It's
bulkhead
on your
seat,
international flights.
bulkhead seat just means the first row.
It's
Yeah, it's the row without seats in front of you. So on our plane, it was like row 30. I think the front row also has it, but then there was like a section with bathrooms, and then we were the first one after that.
Got it.
which is another huge plus of
And we're by the
getting.
bathroom.
So you request a bassinet, and then because you get a bassinet, you get a bulkhead seat, which is like great for us.
Oh,
We
yeah.
were
Foot-
so much more
Foot
comfortable.
room and everything.
We had so much more, and then we could like stand up and like rock her if we needed to. So it was just really nice.
Oh, that's good to know.
And I mean, I would just always suggest go up to the counter, make sure they know you have a baby. And we did fly Delta, which is the best in my opinion, but they were so willing to like move people around, figure out whatever they could to give us what we needed. So like we got a bassinet on the way there. On the way back, we couldn't get a bassinet seat, but they gave us 2 empty seats, one on next to me and then one on the other side of Zach. So we had extra room.
Right.
So it just like advocate for yourself, go up to that counter, tell them what you want, and hopefully they'll work with you if you're good with a good airline, you know.
Yeah,
I'm sure
well, and keeping you
not every
happy
airline.
keeps the whole plane happy.
Right.
Like if-
Yeah. I'm sure not every airline is that willing
Right.
to do that, but might as well try.
I remember being on a plane before having a baby, and you sit by a baby and you're sort of swearing in your head.
Yeah.
Like,
Now we're on the other side of things.
So now you're on
Right?
the other side of things.
Yeah, you
I
become a
never-
parent and you're like, sorry about that.
Yeah,
totally.
totally.
So anything you can, that I feel like most people give you some grace if your baby starts screaming or anything, but definitely advocating for yourself for what you need to help the baby. Everyone around you will thank you if you do that.
Yeah. So I feel like, because how old was she when you guys were traveling? She was like 4 months when she
4
went?
months on the way there, and then 5
Yeah.
and
So
like a week on the way back.
Okay. So she's still pretty
Yeah.
little
Yes,
Mhm.
obviously bassinet, you can't do that.
when they roll.
I think they have online, they have like a pound limit or weight limit.
Yeah.
Limit.
mhm.
So you can check
Yeah,
that.
she's a little girl too. So now she's probably 15 pounds at almost 6 months.
Yeah.
She's 6 months in a week. So she's not huge.
Mhm.
So she still fits.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just thinking like it changes so quickly because you have like a
Mhm.
45-month experience. I'm at whatever I'm at 15 months where she's like
Yeah.
walking and she can do the alligator
Yeah.
like,
Totally.
roll out of my arms and talking and just like all these
Totally.
things. So for us, and I feel like she was like 10 months when we went to Arizona, we were
Mhm.
tablet and headphones all the
Yeah.
There
way,
you go.
like screen time out the window,
Go
whatever
for it.
you want. And she zeroed in on
Exactly.
it. And I remember a flight attendant being really glad that we had the headphones because they don't let you play it just out loud, but it definitely
yeah.
keep her like zeroed in. And then I just saw, because after 2, so before 2, they can just be on your lap and you don't have to buy a thing, and you can get the bassinet, sounds like within the pound limit, the weight limit.
Yeah.
And then after 2, you have to buy a seat, but you can also bring your car seat on the plane.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I just watched somebody who flew and they were like, my kid didn't even realize like we're on a car, we go in the car seat, we're in the plane, we go in a car seat. And they were like super content and contained. And they said
Yeah.
it really well, which sounds great.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah. That
So-
is a really good idea.
Yeah, and then you get your car seat on the plane. Then you don't have to
Right.
worry about
Yeah.
where it is while you're flying.
I feel like the only thing would be like feeding, because you're not really supposed to feed them while they're all
That's
strapped in
true.
like that. But I mean,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
So you got to take them out, I guess.
Take them out
Yeah.
for that.
depending on how long the flight is. All right, let me see what else I have for questions. The blowout pack. Okay, so I've got passport and then like transporting milk. And we kind of talked about this before we started recording, that you and I just kind of like breastfed, but we learned that TSA lets you take.
Yeah. TSA lets you take milk, formula. I'm pretty sure there's no limit. You can take as much as you need to get through your flight. It sounds like they will just do extra screening if it's over, the 311 rule.
Right.
So they might do extra, they might, pull you aside. So give yourself a little extra time maybe to get through security. If they need to do an extra scan on your stuff. But yeah, you can definitely take whatever you need to take to get your baby there without going hungry.
Yeah, like I mean, formula, you'd need water and then just the powder. And then if you have milk, you're going to need like ice packs and stuff like that.
Right. You're going to need a cooler or
somewhere
to
keep
it cold.
I don't know if this is every airline actually, but I know moms can bring their pump bag and things like that. That doesn't count towards your personal item and carry on. Like you can also bring your pump bag.
That's nice.
With maybe your formula or whatever, or cooler bag. Like that doesn't count towards your luggage. So I don't know if that's every airline though. So
I think
I would always just call. To make sure.
But I feel like most airlines are pretty accommodating to like make sure that babies can get fed and that you're comfortable having a pump and stuff like that. So, but I agree. I feel like check your airline and check the local TSA and see what they say. But knowing that that's even an option.
Right. Exactly.
And
what else? Passport.
Passport. Was that easy?
Yes. Well, so it's pretty easy. So in order to get a baby a passport, both parents need to be present for like the signing or whatever.
So you both have to sign that you're okay with your baby getting a passport.
When you fill out the application,
maybe they're worried about one parent taking them
the baby
overseas and whatever. Yeah. So you both have to be there, and then they need a picture with an all-white background. So, and there can be no hands in it or anything. So that's sort of that's a challenge when your baby can't like sit
or hold their head up
or hold their head up. Because she was like 3 weeks old when you got it.
Yeah. Which is crazy that it's good for 5 years.
Right. And it's good till she's 5. She looks like every newborn.
Already.
Yeah.
Sorry, Indy, if you're watching this.
Yeah.
So we were in the post office and they had this like white bed sheet that someone was holding in the back. And then I had her like sitting in my hand, trying to balance her, and without my hand being in. And so we took like 5 pictures that way, and none of them were good.
Oh my God.
They also need to be looking at the camera, like their eyes can't be off or closed. Like they need to make sure that they can see their eyes. So, and like they can't like have their head tilted. It needs to be straight forward. So
then we finally figured out that we should just lay the sheet on the ground.
Right.
No, we put it
in her car seat, and then lay her in it and just take the picture that way and just try and make the sheet look nice behind her so it doesn't look whatever.
So that was brilliant.
And that worked.
Oh my God. I mean, that's a good tip.
Yeah.
Funny.
Much
so do you think that
then we got it right away?
Yeah. Do you feel like moving forward, you're just going to keep, I mean, you've got a job now, so you're going to be traveling for work, and this can be something that you do more frequently?
I think so. So I work remotely.
Oh, okay.
And so we're sitting at like my work setup right now. And I basically brought my virtual office with us. And so we want to keep traveling. We are going back to Utah in November, but so for like 2 months now, because right now it's the start of August, we want to be kind of traveling around, and we have to work around my work schedule, so it'll be a little bit challenging. but we want to try and see new places that we haven't been. So we've talked about trying to go to Hawaii and book a monthly rental, short-term rental, and live there. We are Airbnb-ing our Utah place still, so that gives us some freedom to kind of move around.
Totally.
But then the rentals kind of dry up in November, so that's when we're going back to Utah, and we'll live there for a while. I do have to travel for work, but we haven't really traveled much with COVID and a lack of in-person meetings. So if that starts to pick up again, then maybe we'll have the option to extend work trips, kind of like this one we did in Spain.
Right.
But yeah, so our house, basically we kind of put it on Airbnb, not knowing if it would rent or not. And we're just like, well, we'll see what happens. If it rents, we'll find a place to go. And it's been renting. It's pretty much rented until the end of October. So now we're like, okay, where can we go for
Figure it out.
Right now we're in Minnesota.
So we flew back to Minnesota.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
We've done this in person.
Oh my gosh, no kidding. That's so fun. I didn't know that.
Yes. We're here. We have a wedding at the end of this month, and Zach has a bachelor party. So we're here for this month, and then we'll go off for September and October, and then we'll probably head back to Utah unless it keeps renting, I guess. We'll see.
Yeah.
But that was kind of our whole goal was, we have this place to go if, we need a house, but as long as it's being rented out, then like our, mortgage is being paid for, plus if we're making any money on top of that, that's great. It can go towards a different place for us to stay. And that's kind of how it's working out right now.
That's fantastic.
So
you guys set it up. I love it. I love. All right. Well, I am so glad that you guys were willing to do this and just chat about everything. And I've been following along with all of your stuff, but it's good to like get all the little details that you missed. You're like, oh, I didn't see that Instagram story or whatever. And so it's cool to like talk about all that. And I think just traveling on a plane can definitely hinder people from doing it, or even like a road trip. I mean, Seth and I even, we're like, yeah, we're not doing that. That sounds like terrible. That doesn't, and I think it's just, I think it's just getting there and doing it again. And like the first couple times, it probably will be terrible. And then you're like, oh, we have to do this, or, oh, we learned about the bassinet, or putting them in their PJs, or different things. And it makes it easier and easier. And how cool for our kids to be able to just like travel all over. And I don't know. I love what you
Yeah, I think it definitely can be scary. I know I was super anxious. I've never been anxious on a plane before, but definitely a little more anxious when I was flying with her for the first time. But you get through that first flight, and then it's just going to get easier and easier. And obviously things aren't always going to go perfectly, but you will survive, and it's worth it.
And you just roll with it.
Yeah, and you never have to see the people on the plane again. So if your baby starts fussing, it's okay.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so what is your blog and what is your Instagram so that people can get tips and read this blog that you're writing?
Basically everywhere we are Rules of the Road, but Ruhls is Ruhls, which is our last name, Ruhl. So on Instagram, we're at Rules of the Road. We have a YouTube channel that's Rules of the Road, and rulesoftheroad.com.
Easy freaking peasy. I love it.
Yep.
Good. Okay, well, thank you guys so much. And I'll be seeing you on
Thank you.
Instagram.
Yay.
Thanks, Shayla.
Thank you.
Thank you.